say, hey, 34th and 42nd, it'd be great to be, pushing that. It's just, it makes sense. I take the 34th Street crosstown and it's,
We walked.
yeah, we could walk faster.
We were at some meeting, then we just walked because it was faster.
Yes, so
I don't
anyway,
doubt it.
that's,
So, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
oh no.
I
that's it.
just wanted to, so we've been, dealing with both the substance abuse and the homeless shelters and everything, and we do desire to see more supportive housing, but also to a fair share. And I know there's been pushback in Queens with the homeless shelter that was proposed out there. And East Harlem, for the longest time I can remember, has often taken on more than its fair burden. But we have a lot of people, including members who, on our board, who are formerly homeless. And so we are sensitive to the needs, and we'd like to see that a way that they can transition. And I think it's one, fair share to supportive housing to help transition, and then affordable housing to allow them to be sustained and maintained. So I think that any way we can continue to work together collaboratively, we're very on board, but we're trying to find
Our fair
pathways.
share is pretty even. We might be like at the, it's not
Yeah, so
over,
just-
but it's,
Yeah, so just sharing that.
we're
That's all.
open to it.
Thanks.
So, I'd like to add for CB6, or CB7. CB6 had one of the first micro units.
Yeah.
The then councilperson worked very closely with CB6. We got the AMIs lowered and the bandwidths were really, the incomes were really high. We got the bandwidths lowered and a broader bandwidth. And then we had set-asides for homeless veterans because the Veterans Hospital is right near there. So that was a big win. And so far, it's been working out.
They're beautiful facilities. Those
Yes.
apartments are
And-
very
and-
small, but they're really.
I think it's
Part
the
of
same
what we
developer,
got
actually.
was
Oh.
Monadnock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
No.
Part of what we also negotiated was getting the Murphy beds, which are actually very expensive, and it was donated for all the veterans who moved in. So they came in and essentially
Yeah.
had a furnished 230 to 350 square foot apartment.
Actually, we're doing that too with, we're also pushing back on the AMI levels because they go up to 130% of AMI, and that's not sensitive. And in ours, the built-ins are included in the development, so you won't have to raise funds for that, that'll be there.
One quick thing on that, sorry, the Share NYC, which is proposing these co-living spaces, we have one in East that's coming to East Harlem. We're gonna be taking a tour of it, but we also wanna make sure it's fulfilling a need from our budget request and statement of district needs, so it's like, so, thank you.
On the 14th Street, I haven't had a chance to read the committee resolution, but 12th and 13th Street have been experiencing issues with trucks, because trucks are not aware that they can use 14th Street. And so it's creating some issues, and the educational component, I think that people are so interested in not being in violation. And that's an interesting point, because that's part of what's being speeded up, is moving some of the trucks through and the truck routes in the city.
Yes.
And it's been, we discussed it briefly, so I don't know have all the details, but I thought that was an interesting component, because if we changing all the other crosstown
Trucks are okay, they need to know they're.
That's right.
On 34th Street, Bloomberg had proposed something like a busway.
It was Transitway, it was 34th Street Transit. We
Transit,
approved it,
remember,
yeah.
and there were big issues because there's all of these paid parking facilities that we're gonna end up losing the way it was being proposed at the time. And so there was a block by block analysis of all the businesses and how it would be impacted. And that's archived somewhere in the city council.
Yeah, we have all that info, yeah, we do, yeah.
So
I'll share that
something
with
to
the other
look at.
boards too.
Yes. Okay, CB5.
Thanks. And Vicki sends her regrets. She was unable to be here today. I'm Craig Slutskin, the secretary of the board. Vicki and I have both spoken at these meetings about our Broadway corridor restricted licensing area, which was formed to study the area around Broadway and Madison Square Park and Herald Square. In terms of liquor licenses, we had seen so many of these liquor licenses come up in a very short period of time because of all these new hotels and new restaurants. The task force finally presented its findings, conclusions, and guidelines to the board this month, and a formal policy was approved by the full board. So our policy on what's called the Broadway Corridor Restricted Licensing Area, including guidelines, it's actually found online if anybody's interested. It includes maps, charts, findings, hotel occupancies, as well as a matrix that we can go through in determining our position on individual liquor license requests in this area. We do want to congratulate Board 1 on placing first in the paper challenge. Our reward of $3,000 we gave to the New York Passive House, which was founded in 2010 by a group of professionals who found the need for energy-efficient built environments. They lead the movement to promote the building energy standard for a more healthy, comfortable, and energy-efficient built environment in the New York City area. This month, the board voted to support a local law, 1737, introduced by council members Rivera and Powers, along with other council members, to amend the process for issuing an after-hours variance. The bill has been introduced to mediate between the large number of building projects throughout the city and all the noise complaints of residents. That's one of our biggest complaints in our district is simply noise, as I'm sure it is in many other community boards. What this would do is restricts the time for these after-hour variances to require that they're only issued between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. during the week, and 8 p.m. and 6 p.m. on weekends. It's also limiting applicants to only request the variances for 3 days a week during the week and 1 day on the weekend, and requires them to expire after 15 days. So we did vote to support that. As some of you may have seen, Councilman Powers and the Borough President co-authored an op-ed calling for the pedestrianization around Rockefeller Center, between 49th and 50th Streets, between 5th and 6th Avenues. We took a vote and recommended immediate coordination between DOT and the NYPD to implement the temporary improvements on 49th and 50th, and also 5th Avenue for the upcoming holiday season. Including the reported DOT treatment of 3 blocks of 5th Avenue. Also in that is better designed pedestrian control techniques on these streets. We also called on DOT to implement a more comprehensive study to look at the area around Rockefeller Center, especially between 49th and 50th Streets, to determine whether it makes sense for full closure and pedestrianization of these blocks. We're asking the DOT to present a new design by next summer. So this way we can have potential full implementation by holiday season 2020. We also, staying on the Rockefeller Center subject, we voted to support their application to make changes in the area just for the channel gardens, the sunken stairs, the sunken plaza, the north and south gardens, and also the plaza street bed. The ice rink will not be reduced in size or anything like that, but they did make a number of improvements which we felt were quite appropriate. And that's our month.
Great. Thank you. CB4.
Hi, everyone. Our issues are the same issues we had last month, and the month before, and the month before. And I imagine the issues we're going to have in December, and January, and February. Parks. Okay, our park along the river is not yet finished. Pier 97, I don't know if you've seen, that's the furthest north in the park, around 58th Street, 57th Street. The redesign was presented to our Parks Committee, and it's out there, and it's funded. The funding for that pier was actually part of the deal that was made about 2 years ago to get a park in the CB2 district. I think, what is it called now, Little Island? The Dilla Park.
Not this Diller, by the way.
Not your Dilla.
Yeah.
No relation.
Another Dilla. I think they now name it Little Island. So
It is called Little Island.
Yeah.
Yep.
The deal was, we gotta finish the park in the north. That's part of Pier 97. And additionally, you're aware that we have a tow pound, which is supposed to be, get out of there, and Corey, the speaker, he's pushing. There was a preliminary study of how do we do it.
Place where you bring impounded cars.
I think
Oh, the
part of
tow
the
pound.
issue, and I'll just say this off the record, but of course there's no off the record here. I think it has to do with the culture of the people who operate the tow town and their ability to see other ways of being in the world and to follow their procedures. That is a detriment to finding a new spot. So they have to be assisted in refocusing of how they do their work, which I think is moving along. And so hopefully in the next 2 decades, it will be moved. And hopefully in my lifetime, I will see a new park at Pier 76. We also have the helicopters there, and I know if some of you are familiar, legislation is being proposed to eliminate helicopters flying in Manhattan. See what happens with that. And also we have the new park between 10th and 11th Avenue on north-south, 34th Street to 39th Street. Currently, it's renamed the Bella Absent Park. And we still have the last 2 blocks of that to be finished. And it's in the design phase. We've met with the people who are working on the park and giving them our suggestions, how to tweak it and make it more presentable. And it's also amazing how sometimes groups plan in a very narrow way and don't know what's happening up down the block from where they are. So they're all ending the park at 39th Street, and they proposed a park facility building. The park is kind of elevated there, and it would be a blank wall to the street. And they say, well, all that's proposed over there is going to be a bus garage. That's what the Port Authority bus terminal is rebuilding. And originally there was going to be a bus garage storage facility. And we updated them and saying, no, it's going to be probably more than a garage. It may also be, and this is all talks we're having with Port Authority, some new terminal facility, because we want all those buses off the street. And they say they can't do it all up on 8th Avenue. Okay, we got something space here, and help pay for it, of course. We're a little different than most of you other boards. Okay, put up a 40-story building. We have no problem with that. In fact, we want to put up 2. 1 commercial, 1 residential. So we told the box people, you can't put a blank wall. People are going to be living across the street. People are going to be seeing da-da-da. Oh, we didn't know that. So I guess part of the function of the community board is to bring people together. You know, we're trying to change the neighborhood. So that's our parks. Talking about change, you know, you're familiar with the Hudson Yards, right? Well, the Hudson Yards, what's up there right now is what we call the Eastern Yards.
Right.
There's that whole area from 11th Avenue to 12th Avenue, which is what we call the Western Yards, which, according to the original plan, they should be now constructing the platform, which they're not, but as we walk by. We're actually having a meeting with them being the developers related. Okay, guys, what's going on? We've heard rumors. You know, you keep your ear close to the ground, so you hear all kinds of rumors. Originally, the Western Yards was going to be predominantly, unlike, the Western Yards, unlike the Eastern Yards, have been predominantly residential. We've heard rumors that maybe they're backing off from that. That being what we had negotiated 15 years ago, 2005, 6, 7. Points of agreement, we'll call it a community benefits agreement, whatever you want to call it, in terms of affordable housing, some on-site, some off-site, a school, access for the High Line, because the High Line ends in a big sweep around, and we want that to continually be public, not just officially public, but actually public. In other words, don't design something that prevents the public from seeing that there's a public space there. So we're gonna begin some negotiations and discussions. It's not negotiations, it's discussions to see what's going on with the western yards. Also housing, we have a number of sites. I might have mentioned a couple of months ago, the slaughterhouse site. We have an MTA site that was not used, and a Department of Environmental Protection for the water tunnel site. Affordable housing, we originally had an agreement for X amount of housing with a certain bandwidth. That was 8 years ago, and then of course it was announced, oh, it's a little narrower bandwidth, and we're having supportive housing. Which came as a surprise to many people. We have many facilities within our area, and most of them function very well for formerly homeless people. Community supported. We're getting a new one on 41st Street for women. Well, we actually only have one, and we have some difficulty with. And on the slaughterhouse side, we're proposing more supportive housing. So we're in discussions, how to balance it, what to have, where to have it. Rather than looking at each site individually, we want to look at it as a whole, even though they're not contiguous. Mentioned the Port Authority. We had formerly a former women's detention facility on West 20th Street, which over a number of years, our president was very active in that. Was going to be a center for women's activities, women's organizations. And the people sponsoring it decided they would rather put their money into programs than brick and mortar. So we're going to have a meeting with our state senator who has initiated this to see what the possibilities are going forward. Housing is a possibility. We certainly don't want it converted to another luxury condominium on West Street, which we have enough. We're just about, well, we're gonna get a few more, but you don't want that one converted. So we'll see what happens. That's a longer term. And as Molly mentioned, yeah, 14th Street is a success. So we gotta, I guess, educate the trucks, Carter. And looking now at 34th Street, 23rd Street. Just as a sort of aside, we never, we do this what do they call it, SBS, that's how they brand it,
Mm-hmm.
special bus service.
So-
And if you travel outside New York and you see what bus rapid transit really looks like, we're only halfway there. We're only halfway there. So I'm looking at 14th Street because they're building, the platforms now. But you go in other places in the world, those platforms are not 6 inches high. Those platforms are 2 feet or 3 feet high because the bus door, you don't have to step up to get into the bus. The bus door opens and the platform meets the bus and you walk straight in. Or if you're on a wheelchair, because you ramp up to the platform and you go in. It always amazes me that we do sort of, we pat ourselves on the back because we're doing this SBS and now we're building these little platforms on Broadway. So you step onto the platform, you still gotta step onto the bus.
Don't most buses kneel?
See?
Don't the buses kneel?
That takes time. That stops.
The current design for buses actually is to lower the interior level of the floor of the bus so that it needs to kneel less anyway.
Okay, but that takes time.
Yeah.
And Georgia's open,
It'll cycle
go
through.
in, less time stopping,
Get there.
less time starting. That's also the whole point of, you pay your fare before you get on the bus. So the bus has this less waiting time. Anyway, that's, we should open up our eyes and see what's going on with the world.
Sorry if I missed this. Can I ask a question, Rosie? Where did the trucks go that were on 14th Street?
Aren't they
Trucks
supposed
are
to?
allowed.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Oh, they
of
are
what we're-
allowed
They
on
are
there?
allowed.
Yeah.
Oh, so then what are you educating the
Trucks are
trucks
allowed to
about?
make deliveries.
That they're not using the
not
corridor
using
because
it.
they
You know,
pay
if
for
you
the
go to
other
New
door.
Jersey.
Oh, I
Going
had it
straight down the tr-
backwards.
No, no, but I
They're
think
clogging
they're
13th
actually
Street,
not just
essentially.
deliveries,
Yeah,
I think they're allowed to
'cause-
use it, which is
All
that's
the way
Okay.
across?
Yeah, and I think that's what's causing the problems, because we're getting some of the bigger trucks
Ah.
can't make the turns out of 12th and 13th.
Oh, God,
and
that's
It's
right.
not really designed,
Mhm.
and so it's, instead of
Especially with the parking
speeding
on
up, it's
University
creating other
Place.
little tweaks, but
What- what
I don't know enough about that, though. I
Nah,
think the
you-
trucks are
There's no
allowed.
problem, they can't
They
sell
are
all
What I
the
did
car
see a
parking
few nights
apparently.
ago was, I think it was Wednesday night, a use that was not necessarily planned for the busway. There was a gaggle of,
That's a problem.
probably late adolescent,
For sure.
early 20s,
Okay.
boys, I think they were all boys, on their skateboards, must have been about 15 of them, just coming right down 14th Street, doing their.
Oh, no
back-
kidding.
Until they
up,
get run over by a
just-
bus.
They took over the whole street, it was delightful, it was delightful.
That's another good, don't get me started.
That's
Like
my-
elementary school,
You did enjoy
or
it.
middle school.
Yeah.
We don't let the boys in.
I'm not in the
Yeah.
early 20s.
Okay.
We have a couple of new skate parks that they can go to, not that they will.
Maybe they were headed for the one on 23rd Street.
C3.
Morning, everyone. Michael Marino, second vice chair. So we are working with the 5th Precinct and the city and state legislators to hopefully try to close a loophole regarding intercity buses. Right now, when they get a summons, it's brought before the ECB tribunal, and the judge usually just dismisses it. So we're trying to get that loophole closed so that it's brought before a different body and it's taken more seriously so that we stop having issues with the intercity buses in our district, and probably your district as well.
You see me smiling at you, yeah.
We are also participating in the religious property task force here in the Borough President's office because we have a lot of structures in our district, mainly in Chinatown, one of which basically just got sold out from under us without any communication with the board or the community at all. And we have invited the MTA to our December Human Services meeting, specifically to address some of the concerns that we have about the 500 additional state cops that are going to be launched into the subways, and what are they going to be patrolling, who are they going to be patrolling, why aren't they wearing body cameras, and how are they coordinating what they're doing with the NYPD. So hopefully they will come and we'll get some answers to those questions.
Can you make that an open thing and just send us notification? Because there may be, I think people from us would be interested and others as well, as long as it's not
No, all
district specific,
of our
which it
committee
isn't.
meetings are open to the public, so.
No,
like-
that's not what I mean, but
Oh.
since it's not specific to Board 3, it is really the
Yeah.
entire city, it would be
Yeah.
of interest to people
Yeah.
around the city, so maybe you could just find a large venue and let
Okay.
everyone know.
I'll let our district manager know. We're currently playing a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole with Department of Sanitation trucks. Ever since they lost their garage in Chelsea, I think it was, they've been parking their trucks on our streets, mainly 1st and 2nd Avenue and 10th Street. So the community's been up in arms about the smell, the rats, the loss of parking. So we just found out yesterday that all of the trucks that are currently parking on East 10th Street are now moving to Pier 42, which there's already 30 trucks there, so now we're putting more garbage trucks in an area that should really be a park. So it's kind of a constant game of whack-a-mole with the Department of Sanitation because it's a little bit of not in my backyard going on with everybody. Last month I had brought up the issue about about homelessness not being on DCP's drop-down menu for when we do our district needs and
Yeah.
budget priorities. And I'm happy to say that by the end of that day, they added it. Mainly because as I was sitting here, our district manager was having a meeting with people from DCP, and they basically put it on right in front of her. So it's now an option that we can choose.
Yay,
So-
thank you.
Molly mentioned the ESCR passing. Probably seen it in the paper. It's most likely going to be facing a legal challenge now. So we'll see where that goes. We're dealing with a lot of other park things going on in our district as well. The Brooklyn Bridge Esplanade is has been constantly coming to the Parks and Rec Committee to present their plans, which includes a step down into sort of a beach area under the Brooklyn Bridge, which there's some back and forth as to whether or not that's going to be always accessible or whether or not it's only going to be accessible when there's events going on, which looks like it's only going to be accessible when there's events going on right now. And now that ESCR is, so to speak, off our plate, we're working on LMCR, which also affects Community Board 1, which has been rebranded Montgomery to Brooklyn Bridge Coastal Resiliency, which makes everybody confused because everyone's been calling it LMCR for the past 5 years. So we're trying to get them to rebrand it back to LMCR so that people know that when there's a poster on their door about a meeting about this, that it's actually LMCR and not something that they don't know what it's called. And I think the last thing really is that we were finally able to relaunch our Facebook page after many years of it being hijacked by a former member who wouldn't give up passwords. So we,
Seriously?
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Oh, wow.
That's a new problem.
So now we're moving on to Twitter and trying to get that page reactivated. So
Are you tweeting about the guy who wouldn't let go of the
well, he still has the Twitter passwords. We have Facebook
Yeah.
back. So we are. So we're still looking at probably in the next few months. I mentioned this last month as well. Revamping our policies about how we use social media, because right now they're so strict that we really can't post anything other than our calendar of meetings coming up. So if any of you have more looser guidelines that you're willing to share, please send them to our district manager.
They should talk to Lucian.
We came up with a strategy too.
Those trucks came from Chelsea.
I forget where the yard was. They had a.
We have a huge repair facility for sanitation in Chelsea, and in Hell's Kitchen, we have a major garage.
They had a garage somewhere, it might have been the West Village, that they lost the lease on. And all of those trucks from that garage came to our district.
Two.
Somewhere on the west side, all I know is it's somewhere on the west side.
No,
They're on Connect Street now.
Somewhere on the west side. Oh, and since Molly mentioned the Mount Sinai thing, I haven't read the latest resolutions, but I know our Health and Human Services is working on that. One of the main issues seems to be that they're not accepting a lot of insurances that we want them to be accepting, because they're not really going to be a benefit to our district unless they let people use the insurance that they have. So.
Okay. CD2.
Tonight seems to be a popular night to have full board meetings. We also have our full board meetings. We have officer elections. There are no contested positions. So we have two new, probably we'll have two new officer positions, a new secretary and a new assistant secretary. The Envision Soho NoHo report has finally been released. I've talked about this for a number of months. The Envision Soho NoHo plan was taking a look at the underlying zoning within Soho and NoHo and makes some recommendations. I haven't had a chance, since it was just released yesterday, to take a full close look at the whole report, but it is available online, and we are working with the three plan sponsors, City Planning, Borough President's Office, and Councilmember Margaret Chin, as far as how the feedback on the report is going to happen. I think there's going to be a public meeting that the plan sponsors host, as well as we're trying to sort out how the community board might have a response to the plan as well. And the report is fairly comprehensive, and so we're not sure which, we're going to figure out how we're going to respond to it, as far as there's land use issues that are underlying in the report, as well as quality of life and a number of other areas. So should be continuing into the next few months, which is very interesting. Many of you are familiar with Washington Square Park. It's
Heard of it.
Yeah.
Been there.
it has a long and storied history. It is become a focal point for a lot of quality of life complaints from a lot of local residents, and it's becoming an interesting vehicle in which to look at some of the quality of life problems that are happening in our community, because the park is, as most of you know, has always been inaccessible of all kinds, it's of all kinds of communities. And right now, some of the groups that are there, drug dealing is seemingly increased to a lot of people. There's been an increase in some people with mental health issues, homeless issues, and these all seem to be originating around the park from people's perspective. And Senator Hoylman has hosted a few meetings now with the local police precinct, which was a walkthrough, which was well attended by some of the stakeholder groups, and we also met with the DA's office, and that was very interesting as they told us about a lot of their diversionary programs that they're now implementing, and this is probably going to be ongoing, but it's been an interesting way to look at the problems in our community. And we have a new homeless drop-in center that's opening on 14th Street in the coming months. They had some trouble finding a location in our area because within their budget, we didn't have many spaces that were available. And we don't have a whole lot of social services within CB2, but it's something that at least I'll speak for myself, we're always looking to increase that. And as you know, that's always a little contentious. But this homeless drop-in center is really targeted on people who are very difficult to get off the street. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this all interplays around Washington Square Park. One of the things that we heard is that the counselors and the people who are doing the outreach are changing often, and it makes it very difficult to reach some of the target populations. And so something that's just sort of been unfolding in the last 2 months, which has been an interesting, unique way to look at some of these issues. Pier 40, our community board has a different perspective on Hudson River Park, and I think that our board doesn't feel that it's so appropriate to build tall buildings, particularly not in a park. And so there's been some friction. Right now, the elected officials who represent Community Board 2 had worked very hard in the last, for quite some time, to develop some legislation with respect to amending the Hudson River Park Act as it relates to Pier 40. And they put forward the legislation. It was voted on in both the Senate and the Assembly, and there's been some friction because the governor has asked for some chapter amendments to the legislation, which are outside the purview of what the elected officials in this group had put forward.
What does he want? What does he want?
What's his
I
name?
forget the specifics, but a lot of it is basically more. And
More what? More building?
More building.
Development.
Yeah, exactly, more development in order to supplement the budget in the park. And
Because the park is only funded,
right,
self-funded.
it's self-funded, which has been a point of contention, I think, for a lot of people in our community board would like to see. The massive development that's happened along the park on the west side has, in many people feel in part, has been driven by the success of the park, and yet none of that success or the development has been channeled back into the park. So there's some friction about how the park develops its income, and so there's been issues with that. But it's created a lot of friction between our two community boards, which is interesting because we have competing interests, and it is playing out in a way that's very interesting in the community. And it's just something to think about. We very much believed in the process and the way that this legislation was developed, even though the board didn't necessarily support everything in the legislation. But the process, and now that's created some issues, and we will see how that plays out in the next however many days there are to the end of the year to see what happens. As far as let's see what else. So film shoot permits have been a big issue. We've been getting a lot of complaints. CB4 and CB2 and I think CB1 had met their district managers to review that. We also, at one of our committees, we reviewed, I think there's 6 different pieces of legislation that I believe Councilmember Chin had put forward on film permits. That's just been a big issue. We have a lot of iconic areas in our community boards as far as others, and some are more heavily used than others, but it's hard to put on sort of generic policies for, I think, in the sensitivity, it's sort of the fox watching the hen house type of situation where, when is too much? And, that's different for each neighborhood, but it seems to be it's only complaint driven back when it's too much. And then there's a moratorium put on for a while. That doesn't seem to be such a great way to handle this. But I just saw in my email now that apparently there's a code of conduct for film shoots, and that's something that my district manager, Bob Gormley, had said to me, one of the code of conduct that says contact the community ward. So that's not happening, I guess, all that much. But and it was interesting. We also in a meeting last night where we had all of our kids giving their ongoing updates. They in the meatpacking bid mentioned that they try and work with the film shoots on their parking placement so that there's less of an impact on sort of the street walls on what you see, because that often impacts the shopping in the district, because people can't see what the stores are and it's just two walls of trucks going down the blocks. I was at the DCP, I'm not sure if it was training for the community board, all of you were invited. It was interesting during the meeting when they were giving an overview of the ZAP, which is the zoning application portal. I took a look and I found out that we had extra time on a land use matter that we were not aware of, and so we were able to have a second meeting on something that we had hoped for, but we didn't know that we could, because we thought it had been certified a little earlier than it actually was, and so that seems to be a very great tool. It's very easy to see what the timeframes are, and we'll leave it at that.
Quick question. I thought there was a NYPD command center at the park.
Why
Why would that not be, they haven't, it used to be?
And it wasn't manned, and it was actually a trail that they had all the TV cameras were going into, but it wasn't necessarily manned. But now with the advent of some of the newer technologies with their camera systems, they all feed into the Real-Time Crime Center and to the precincts. And it's a very good question. Most of them are not actively monitored. They're passively monitored. If there's a problem, they'll go back, or if they're doing an ongoing investigation or particular plan. What we have had in the northwest corner of the park, which is where a lot of the drug dealing occurs, is a van parked out there on an ongoing basis, sometimes at the light tower. It comes and goes, and this is very interesting. This is part of the push and pull of the problem, and part of why the community has been complaining so much, because you push out the issues in the park, then it goes into the surrounding blocks, and then they focus on that, and then it comes back into the park. And this has been going on for decades. It's very interesting. I found a video from the 80s that there was a whole march in NoHo as a result of pushing all drug dealers out of Washington Square Park in 1987 in the spring. I think it was 1987. So it's why it's a very interesting way to look at this problem, just centered around the park, to see if actually there can be a change to something that you all know is very iconic and has its ongoing issues over the years. So.
Xavier?
Just real quick, because I work as a producer, they should be putting up their signs, and if they're not reaching out to you, you'll typically have the location manager or assistant location manager's phone number, and I just recommend your CB members to call them and say, you guys are not complying.
Yeah, and
we have
the problem is people don't know necessarily in advance, like, boom, you come and you go. And a lot of people don't realize that when the film shoots move around, they are known to the city,
Right,
but not necessarily to the local community. So the local community thinks it's a fly-by-night, boom, they come in and they leave, but it's actually an ongoing
production
around the city, and so.
We get the signs in advance that
they're
they're gonna
supposed to put up
be.
a week.
Because it's for cars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A week
Yeah.
in advance, did you say?
I believe it's either 5 to 7 days for the parking. They should be notifying people.
I don't
if I
think we
recall
get them
I
that
think people
far
have
in
gotten
advance.
24-hour notice.
See,
People
that's
unlock their
not-
car and the next morning, their
Your
car is
garage.
missing and it's been towed to another
So
area.
that's a problem then with the production, and so when I've done it, even whether it's been like a low budget film or, your tier 1, tier 2, it's like at least the ones I've been in charge of, So that's going on, and that needs to be addressed, so.
Who remembers the Will Smith fiasco in Soho where he pushed out the windows of his trailer onto the sidewalk so pedestrians couldn't walk, and then demanded that it was his space when the community objected to it? It was years ago. So there's a very entitled, I used to work in that business, there's a very entitled attitude, but they have insurance and they're supposed to be receptive, and if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, there may be insurance questions, so you might want to let them know that it could hurt them financially.
CB1.
It's a motivator.
Good morning. I'm Tammy Meltzer, the Vice Chair for CB1. We've had a lot of resiliency conversations lately, and presentations within the last couple months, which is lovely in some aspects, but of course we are sitting here in season a little bit concerned. So we've not seen anything actually for 5A and Seaport, even though the Battery Park City Authority is now working on sections on the west side, starting maybe as high as Harrison or Northmore, going around to Battery Park City to the pinch points that allowed water to come in over Chambers where somebody actually died after Hurricane Sandy, as well as on the south side connecting from Wagner Park all the way over past the Battery to the bottom of Broadway. The Battery Park City Authority has been bonded, so they are proceeding ahead. They have notified us they're 30% done with design on the south side, which is not without complications and conflict, because it includes a full renovation and redesign of Wagner Park in its entirety. And there are aspects of our board that agree with it, aspects of our board that don't. They are coming back in Q1 to present on the redesign of Battery Park itself. So while there's been lots of conversations, the only actual resiliency protection that we've seen thus far is actually of the ball fields in Lower Manhattan in Battery Park City. And we've heard really nothing even for design plans for 5A and Seaport. And as we all know, with resiliency, your strength is only dependent on your weakest point. So it really won't make a difference if we protect all of one side within the next 5 years if we have nothing from 5A up to, and again, wherever they want to call it, Brooklyn Bridge or Elmsare. We would like it to be one set. The changing names does not help provide continuity for public engagement, and that actually becomes a problem, which also goes back to the same kinds of large-scale conversations we had, that same sort of let's just change all the names and do a new process also applies to the Manhattan Detention Center. Because now, after the vote has been passed, all of a sudden they're changing the process again. And so now there'll be committees that are combined and there'll be a new process, but we don't know what that new process is. So it's very frustrating when you're talking about large-scale projects that you've worked really hard for community engagement. We'd like community engagement to be simpler. So let's keep the names that we've got. Let's move forward. If you need to change the way the process works a little bit, but at least include the names. Don't keep rebranding it, because at the end of the day, coffee is coffee. And let's just kind of keep going with the same. That puts me on to our next largest topic, which is congestion pricing. We are exceedingly concerned about congestion pricing because we have not only the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, and the Queensboro, which is in our neighbor, which comes back down and affects us, but the Holland Tunnel, as well as the Brooklyn Battery. So we have not only the underpass, but the Hugh Carey Tunnel. So we've got lots of input into Lower Manhattan, lots of conversation. We just passed a resolution supporting the two-way tolling for the Verrazano Bridge and hoping that will help relieve the trucks coming into Lower Manhattan. But we're not clear and little dismayed about the MTA having a closed process and how the details will come and impact with whatever is happening, who is making decisions, and how there is really no public engagement in terms of the details, and the devil is always in the details.
No, there's no Manhattan resident on the congestion
Correct.
pricing either.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
something that we specifically don't get.
Yeah, you don't have to be specific about it. I don't think anyone would get that.
I mean, but like, there's like, and there's no, not only is there no Manhattan person on it, but there's no dialogues happening in a public, transparent process. The panel is allowed to be behind closed doors. Even the sustainability panel at MTA was ruled to have to operate by open meeting laws. So we're not understanding how something that affects the entire, let's be honest, and affects the entire island. Good luck with your parking and how that works up there, because we're gonna have issues downtown too.
I know, there are major considerations, and there's no opportunity for anything, and it's insane that we don't have representation, we don't know
Correct.
what's going on, that every neighborhood has its own issues and its own concerns, and while we could all endorse the idea of congestion pricing, it plays out differently, and it's so not fair and not
Correct.
right, and not the way to go about something of such significance.
So there's lots of conversations that we're trying to have, and how to figure out whether we're gonna do a working group or do it in committee has been a little bit of a stumbling block, because every time we figure out, yep, we think we're gonna do a working group on this, then new conversations and determinations are coming out, but that might happen, might not happen, so we're having a little troubles kicking, and it's an urgent issue that we've gotta get moving forward on, so it's we are 2 members short, which we are hoping with the anticipation of applications, we will be filled shortly in the next round. We do have a new urban fellow who started, and her work is going to be focused on public space and open space, as we are always looking on finding creative ways of looking at it, finding more, seeing what can be different than the POPs, which we've already looked at. This is about maybe reinventing and looking at potentials, as well as analyzing what we currently have. I think I'm gonna leave that where, and then the other thing we are working on with the Port Authority. The Port Authority came and gave us an amazing presentation on the Brookfield Pier, which is in Battery Park City. They released an REIF because they have a sustainability goal and a green goal, and the community is advocating that they turn that pier into a hybrid electric pier, because that pier is smack up against the residential community, and there's an incredible amount of complaints that we get for noise and smoke and pollution, both environmental of all kinds there. So we're really hoping that they can move forward and be a guiding light in that manner over there.
What's a hybrid electric pier?
So that right now Waterways operates their ferries to New Jersey, and EDC has said that they're gonna add a ferry from Staten Island directly there and then up to your neighborhood. And we'd like those to be electric or
Or
hybrid.
the ferries, okay.
The ferries, and that if they pull into that dock, it'll
Okay.
be a dock that supports hybrid boats.
Okay,
Um,
understood now.
Currently, the downside with that, although the Port Authority has been very responsive in talking with us, there's actually no way to have a direct complaint line for, if you have a complaint line, a complaint about airline noise, plane noise, or anything revolving around the airports that they operate, there's a dedicated line. Right now, the only way to complain about any of the things that are happening at the Brookfield Pier is to call 311. But 311 does not delineate anything specific, because it's not a city agency. It's the Port Authority that operates it. So we're trying to work with them to figure out how we can have a closed loop, trackable, definable method, because if you go to 311 and you look at noise complaints, you can see the general area, but that could have been any boat that's hugging the water line, not necessarily identified as the ferries. And so what we have to rely on is them looking at the time of the complaint to then go look at what boat it is, which does seem to be a little bit non-trackable or transparent for the public to be able to go. And that's, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, you finish.
So I think that's it for us. We've got a lot of really big things going on. We have lots of little things too, but the big things are feeling a little bit huge.
Can I just add something about after-hours variances, the noise that you said? It came up last night because people were complaining about after-hours variances and kind of getting disregarded by the city. So please tell constituents, because the DOB came and said that they grant after-hours variances just on a statement that it's for public health and safety. It's only when people complain that they come back and evaluate it. But people have to call 311 and not talk about noise, because if they talk about noise, it goes to DEP, and they just kind of push it aside. They have to talk about something else to get it to DOB, who will then reconsider it. So if it comes up with your constituents or anybody else, they need to call 311, ask for DOB, get information, come back to you, to your district managers, and then you could deal with the after-hours variances. Otherwise, DEP just doesn't do it.
One of the other things that we found on a couple of those that happened in our quality of life meeting is that the overnight permits actually expired, that they were still doing work.
Oh, what a surprise.
What a surprise.
There's no policing of that.
But there's no
No.
policing of that, so that's a really sort of important aspect to take a look at as well.
The last council member that paid attention to this, there were two of them.
They got
It was-
fired.
No, one of them became the Manhattan Borough President, and the other
Ah.
one is Dan Grodnick.
I was just kidding.
They took a concerted effort, because what happened right around that time, it was about 6 or 7 years ago, was that what used to happen is that the Department of Buildings would send about a week or two in advance a list of AHVs in your district to each district manager, and give you the opportunity to say, hey, there's a public school right next door, something's gonna be going on, blah, 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 and you had a little bit of a dialogue. Now it's a click-on box, including click-on boxes for things like economic necessity, where no one is actually examining whether that is true. I was shocked to find out that somebody at DOB trimmed the hours for a nonprofit doing a construction work in my district. It is high time. I know Gail probably has sores on her head from beating her head against the wall, but it's high time that we engage collectively on this, because this is an issue that affects all of us, and affects whether it's a residential or commercial or a manufacturing kind of district. It disrupts all of us, and it simply isn't the intent of the law. Not that I have a point of view.
And then I think when I get back to the office, I'm gonna talk to Lucian, because with CB8, we would certainly like to know what your resolution looks like for the landmark preservation staff decision.
It's just a letter, actually, to landmarks. We're
we
trying to
love-
set up a meeting, so anyone who CB5 is interested, CB7 was interested with Roberta, I don't know if you are, but
Half my
into,
district is historic district.
Yeah.
good, so
Yeah.
You
to
bet
go
in there.
down to
We're in.
LPC and actually try and talk to them, and I
Yeah.
think what CB5 just suggested was coordinating through your office, Rosie. So
And then-
the more the merrier and the better.
We'd also love to see what CB3 is doing on a resolution for the loophole for the inner city buses. So,
I'll let you know.
and we are definitely in the, more voices on the same page is awesome.
And the LPC, that also changes the regulations on some temporary permits, which have now been extended to 6 months. So people are wrapping stores, vinyl, colors, other types of things.
Yeah,
in
we
the
have,
historic
we have,
district.
we
So
have
it's-
that and murals that are store-related and stuff,
So there's been some changes, I guess, in the time frame of how long they can.
Years, since we have them
I
for
think
years.
it's up to 6 months. Yeah,
So-
2
So-
months.
Can you
So-
send me a link or just something about that? Thanks.
So the landmarks, yes, I think we definitely want to be involved. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a lot of historic murals, we have Marcus Garvey, you have Mount Morris Park West, even though it's just across the street from Marcus Garvey, but that's a historic district, and we're trying to preserve that, so we'd love to be involved with that.
Great.
The congestion pricing, I lived in London, where it worked there. I think our scenario is completely different because we are an island and the way it's set up and the arteries that kind of feed in, and I think Rosie, if there's any way for us to get someone from Manhattan sitting and liaising,
We're gonna
I
have a
think that,
conversation
yeah,
about that later.
yeah, because that's gonna play a huge part, especially because the uptown locations that a lot of people commute into our neighborhood already, and then they'll take up street parking and just go right down to work. So just,
And we're
Yeah.
losing parking
So
spaces all the time.
I just wanna announce, there's about, definitely just about one vacancy on every board, some board may have two. Now that the online application is open, we are not filling any more of those vacancies. They will be filled now with the application process.
Will that be true for the council member appointments as well?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. And so I will send out to each chair what are the existing vacancies so that we could just be on the same page in case something slipped and someone didn't notify us or didn't notify you, so that we're just clear on what vacancies actually exist right now. And I want to move very quickly to elected official reports before we end today's meeting. Any elected officials, representatives? No? Well, I'd like to introduce Jalissa Santiago, who's here from the Public Advocate's Office. Maybe you can just say what you're doing there. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me here. I am the Director of Borough Advocacy at the Public Advocate's Office. As part of his campaign, he stated that he was going to have borough advocates in each borough, and so we're in the process of onboarding one for each borough, and they will be reporting to me, and so they will represent the public advocates in various community and civic meetings, including community boards, borough boards, precinct councils, all of those fun things.
Yeah.
And so, and I think I may have a few extra cards. Welcome to reach out to me if you ever want to invite us to events or to special meetings or anything. We're going to try to make it to every community board over the next couple months, because obviously one person per borough, that's a lot of meetings. But so we will likely rotate in the meantime until we can get like community liaisons. But yeah.
Oh, great.
Please
Welcome.
convey the thanks of Community Board
Welcome.
7 to the Public Advocate for coming to support us on 107th Street in the shelter.
Absolutely.
Any other elected officials reports?
Everybody, Jeremy from Councilwoman Rivera's office. I'll just touch base on maybe a couple of the things that were brought up from during chairs that we're working on in terms of the busway. Definitely heard also from certain constituents regards to 12th and 13th. And I think a lot of it has to do partially with education, the traffic enforcement agents who are doing the directing of drivers when they approach 14th Street. A lot of them, when they first started this, were treating it just like they would any other assignment, where they're just telling people you can't turn, which is obviously not the rules. As I'm aware, all trucks, delivery, large haul trucks are allowed on 14th Street at all times. What may be, I can't say entirely, but one potential cause of the 12th and 13th Street truck issue is that there are a couple of loading zones, for example, like the Whole Foods there that's on 13th Street, so some of those trucks have to go there. But obviously that's only one instance. There could easily be other trucks that are just being diverted in the wrong way. We're working on doing a walkthrough of DOT with local residents who have reached our office, and I'll certainly reach out to Community Boards 2 and 3 when we have that firm date for that, so that you guys can have a representative there as well. But beyond that, we think it's been a really great success for the most part. Obviously, the speed increases have been fantastic, particularly for our residents in the more eastern portion of the district, especially for our Nitro residents, to get to the subway faster. A couple of other things, East Side Coastal Resiliency passed in the council. We were working with the city. We as part of our agreement, secured funding for a independent facilitator to run the community advisory group, kind of similar to what they've done with the Gowanus Canal Community Advisory Group. The city is looking at different ways on how they're going to make sure that facilitator gets selected. Once we have more updates, we'll be sure to share that with you guys, and I assume the facilitator will probably organize and determine the selection process and more of the day-to-day processes. And then beyond that, the last thing was just the after-hours variance bill that Community Board 5, I don't know, I want to thank them for passing their resolution of support and encourage all other community boards to pass resolutions of support. This bill, I have to give credit to former Councilmember Rosie Mendez had a similar version of this bill when she was in the council, and we're hoping that this time we can get it across the finish line. We hear from everybody that, just a couple of like points that I think you guys all know in anecdotes, but we've found from our data when we were kind of building up the case for this bill, the number of after-hours variance permits has more than doubled since 2013 to over nearly 70,000 issued citywide in 2018. 25% of those are in Council District 2. The large majority of the other ones are in the other districts south of 59th Street. So it's a Manhattan issue, obviously, because we have a lot of buildings, but it's also an issue in any area where you're experiencing, I think, gentrification or issues of new construction. So we hope that the rest of the council will have a lot of support. We're pushing for a hearing in the Housing and Buildings Committee, and we're also going to be pushing as this moves forward for an increase in the budget for DOB. The DOB has not a single staffer assigned to reviewing after-hours permits. They're all done through the computer, and as you guys mentioned, right now the only way we get after-hours permits shut down is when we hear from the community board or from our constituents, and we pressure the DOB to do it, and that's obviously not the way it should be done. And there's going to be, as part of, I know they talk about the new rules and requirements and limiting the actual permits, but there will also be requirements that in cases where it's not a public safety or emergency, they're going to have to provide more detailing as to why they actually need the permit. There's going to be more ability for council members and community board members to review that during that process.
Can you send that around, Rosie? If you want all the board's support, so that.
Yes.
Because I.
So if you can get us the
I'll
wording of the
forward the
bill.
link from legislation.
One of the other things to look at, Jeremy, is revenues. In hearings, we found out that on given years, this generated anywhere from 32 million to 60 million in revenues. And that doesn't go to DLB, it goes to the general city.
Yeah.
So,
That's a really
no
good
one
point.
higher up was
Yeah.
really working to try to curtail, and particularly to find out what these so-called safety issues might be.
That's a very good point, and I can also say, I can't say who it was, but we've had meetings with some different trade organizations. We're hoping that some of them will come out and support, but behind closed doors, some of those people have told us that they know that developers often use these permits to cover up when they've made mistakes or inaccurately budgeted the timing to cover their butts with their investors, to make sure projects get out on time.
Who wouldn't want to finish faster and pay less?
That's all for me.
The community.
Okay, so, is there anything else, or do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye, and thank
See you all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Happy turkey.